Long ago, God spoke to our ancestors in many and various ways by the prophets. But in these last days he has spoken to us by a Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also created the worlds. He is the reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being, and he sustains all things by his powerful word. When he had made purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. For to which of the angels did God ever say, "You are my son, today I have begotten you"? Or again, "I will be his father, and he will be my son"? And again, when he brings the firstborn into the world, he says, "Let all God's angels worship him." The letter to the Hebrews is an interesting letter because in some ways it is more of a sermon than a letter. It's a sermon that describes in great detail the essence of our faith, the essence of who Jesus is, as the supreme revelation of God's grace. Jesus Christ is the mediator of God's love, and the one who is greater than the prophets and all the angels and even Moses. Jesus is the great high priest. Jesus, the one true sacrifice, who gives everything for us and who is at the same time one of us. What a mystery. And this is probably a timely message for those people who were getting a little bit lazy in their faith or a bit complacent in their understanding of who Jesus is. Jesus is unique. Jesus is human and divine. All things were created through the Word. That reminds me of John chapter 1. And it is clear in this passage that God sustains everything through the power of his Word. Sitting at the right hand of God, worshipped by the angels, the very Son of God. But what strikes me more than anything else is verse 3. Because here is described Jesus as the reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being. The reflection of God's glory. Jesus, the imprint of God. The King James version of the Bible puts it like this: He is the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person. Or as another version puts it, the Son reflects the glory of God and shows exactly what God is like. Or this translation, the Son radiates God's own glory and expresses the very character of God. But what I like best is the first translation that talks about imprint, image, icon. Jesus, quite simply but profoundly, shows us something of God's greatness, is an exact image, icon of God, the imprint of God. What is an imprint? What does it do? The dictionary tells us that it is a mark or indentation impressed on something. Could be something physical, such as a slight depression in a surface, on a surface. I'm told, for example, that there are 336 impressions or dimples on a golf ball. Pick up a golf ball, count the number of impressions, the number of dimples on it. Or it could be something a little bit more imprecise, like when we talk about somebody leaving an impression on us, for good or for bad, having an impact on us. I'm sure that we all know people like that. Jesus bears the imprint of God. The writer to the Hebrews is at great pains to remind us that Jesus points us to God. But here's a thought as well. Perhaps we too carry the imprint of God in our lives. We are made in God's image. We are God's imprint. The beautiful hymn, there is a wonderful hymn by Shirley Murray, who makes this very plain. She writes, "O God, we bear the imprint of your face. The colours of our skin are your design. And what we have of beauty in our race, as man or woman, you alone define." And it ends with these words, "O God, we share the image of your Son, whose flesh and blood are ours. Whatever skin in humanity, we find our own." We are the image of God ourselves, in our giving, in our loving, in our compassion, in our care. We bear the image of God, made in God's image. And that is true. That is who we are. People, full of diversity and difference and colours and shapes and sizes and characters and gender and sexuality. All different, all unique, all bearing the image of God. And each one of us with a huge capacity for love. Love towards others, love for God. To be made in God's image, to have the imprint of God in our own lives, gives us a challenge to imprint God's love in our world, in our communities, among the people that we know and love, to show and tell and share God's love with others, to stamp the love of God wherever we go, through words and actions, full of potential. That's what we are, full of potential, full of hope, full of all kinds of wonderful possibilities. It reminds me of those words from Ephesians chapter 2. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared before that we would walk in them. So, go and share. Go and imprint, stamp, reflect the love of God, the glory of God in the world.